Thank you for joining us on Munchkin's Reading Corner. Please hit that subscribe button so you never miss another reading adventure. Today we will be reading Fancy Nancy by Jane O'Connor. If you have this book, go grab it so you can follow along. Listen carefully as I read the story to see if you can answer the questions listed below. At the end of the story, we'll go through the questions to see if you have the correct answers. Question 1. Where do they go for dinner? Question 2. What do they have for dessert? Question 3. What is a fancy word for driver? Now let's read Fancy Nancy. I love being fancy. My favorite color is fuchsia. That's a fancy way of saying purple. I like to write my name with a pen that has a plume. That's a fancy way of saying feather. And I can't wait to learn French because everything in French sounds fancy. Nobody in my family is fancy at all. They never even ask for sprinkles. There's a lot they don't understand. Lace trim socks do help me to play soccer better. Sandwiches definitely taste better when you stick in frilly toothpaste. A princess is supposed to keep her tiara on. What's a fancy girl to do? I asked my doll Mirabelle. Her full name is Mirabelle Lavinia Chandelier. Then I get an idea that is stupendous. That's a fancy word for great. Learn to be fancy with lessons from Nancy. Start today. Easy, fun, free. Soon there is a knock on my door. My family saw the ad. They went to get started right away. The trouble is, my family doesn't own any fancy clothes. That's okay. I go find, what is that fancy word? Oh yes, some accessories. Ooh la la, my family is posh. That's a fancy word for fancy. My mom trills in front of the mirror. Why don't we go somewhere fancy tonight? How about dinner at the King's Crown? Dad suggests. Wow, my parents are acting fancier already. May I escort you lovely ladies outside? The limousine is waiting. My dad is our chauffeur. That's a fancy word for driver. When we arrive at the King's Crown, everyone looks up. They probably think we're movie stars. I'm so proud of my whole family. They eat with their pinkies up and call each other darling. For dessert, let's have parfaits, my mom says. That's French for ice cream sundaes. Amazing! My mother knows French. When our parfaits are ready, I curtsy and say, Mercy. I carry the tray like a fancy waiter. Oops, I trip, I slip. The tray does a double flip. I don't feel fancy anymore. I want to go home. After I get all cleaned up, I put on my dressing gown. Those are fancy words for bathrobe. I feel much better. I'm ready for a parfait. I tell my parents thank you for being fancy tonight. I love you, my dad says. I love you, my mom says. And all I say back is, I love you, because there isn't a fancy or better way of saying that. Let's go through the questions and see if we got the answers right. Question 1. Where do they go for dinner? You're right. The King's Crown. Question 2. What do they have for dessert? Parfaits. Question 3. What is a fancy word for driver? A chauffeur. Good job of following along in the story and getting the answers correct.
Yay!
Today's special shout out goes to Amani Harrison in Independence, Missouri. If you know someone you would like to send a special shout out to, please send us an email along with their name and the city and state they're from, and we will include them in our next shout out. Thank you for watching Munchkin's Reading Corner. Please join us tomorrow on our next reading adventure.